time now for the World Brief and a review of some of the headlines from today's newspapers from around the world. But let me tell you what's happening with World Brief first. Now, the Trump administration has deployed some 4,000 National Guard members and is activating 700 Marines in the Los Angeles area to help the federal government's response to protests against immigration raids. It's been described as an extraordinary mobilization of troops against U.S. residents that California leaders have called authoritarian. Now, tensions between the U.S. federal government and the nation's second largest city dramatically escalated over the weekend as residents took to the streets to demonstrate against a series of brutal crackdowns on immigrant communities. Raids in the region have affected garment district workers, day laborers, and restaurants. And the president of a major California union was arrested by federal agents while serving as a community observer during U.S. immigration and customs enforcement arrests. California's governor, Gavin Newsom, says that he will take legal action against the administration over the deployments. Largely peaceful protests against ICE spread around the country on Monday, including in New York, Chicago, Dallas, and San Francisco, where hundreds of people gathered in the evening for a march through the city's historically Latino Mission District. And Rwanda says it is pulling out of a Central African regional bloc after a diplomatic row over its involvement in the conflict in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, the country was supposed to take up the chairman role of the Economic Community of Central African States, known as ECCAS, which rotates between its 11 members, but it was prevented from doing so at a meeting on Saturday in Equatorial Guinea. Announcing this decision to leave ECCAS, Rwanda said Rwanda said its right to take up the chairmanship was deliberately ignored in order to impose DRC's side of the issues. Now, the row comes as efforts to end the fighting in the eastern DR Congo continue. Following U.S. mediation, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo are working on a draft peace plan that is expected to be signed later on this month. Those are your stories. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
All right. So yesterday, Rwanda's cabinet met to reaffirm this decision to withdraw from ECCAS. And well, we're asking, what's the consequence of it? And generally, the consensus is that ECCAS was an organization that was almost redundant. What economic value was it bringing to its member states? You have countries like Equatorial Guinea. So Equatorial Guinea will continue their chairmanship for another year. It rotates on a yearly basis. And the issue at hand is the fact that DRC said that they cannot attend a summit in Rwanda because they accuse Rwanda of being the aggressor of the issue happening in Eastern Congo. If you look at the broader context of ECCAS, people would say that it's probably one of the least consequential of the African regional blocs, your ECOWAS, your SADC, East African Community with Kenya and so forth. So it's more of a symbolic, that's why I think it's also easier for Rwanda to walk away, because it's a symbolic gesture that says that we are, again, things are not okay. We haven't reached a significant consensus with the DRC with regards to the war. There's still tension between Kagame and Tshisekedi.
Yes.
And this is all coming up. This is, I think, probably the first big diplomatic row we're seeing since Qatar tried to broker that peace deal in the region. So, you know, I think symbolically, it's significant, it's newsworthy. Is it going to translate into anything? Not really. However, I've seen several analyses that are now putting Paul Kagame next to Ibrahim Traore and saying, well, this is how Burkina Faso and Mali and so forth also left ECOWAS. I think it's comparing chalk and cheese, to be honest with you, because it's not so much about an ideological difference. He's not accusing ECCAS itself of being shall I call, a proxy organization to anything, but he is saying that he does not like I believe the word they used was diktat of the DRC, of the Congo over the affairs. Very quickly on the United States and Trump and what's going on. Yesterday, I was seeing pictures of people waving Mexican flags as they were protesting. I think it's gone far from being peaceful. It's destructive. It's disruptive. It's unfortunate that this is what needs to happen now. But I hope things can be cooled off, and then conversations to be had about the autonomy of states in a federal, just as we are having these similar conversations here in Nigeria. Dr. Abati, your take?
Yes, well, very quickly. Let me start with Rwanda. This is not the first time that Rwanda will withdraw from ECCAS. It did in 2007, but it later came back after a few years. And the whole argument also this time around is that in the 22nd Ordinary Summit of the Economic Community of Central African States, Rwanda was also excluded when Kinshasa, when the conference summit was held in Kinshasa, in Democratic Republic of Congo. And this time around, Rwanda says it is turn to become the next chairman after Equatorial Guinea. But that the decision had been taken that Rwanda is the aggressor in the conflict in the eastern part of the DRC. And to that extent, it feels unwanted. Will Rwanda return eventually? Well, that remains in the womb of time. But what we know is that the intervention by the UK, the United States, and also the United Nations has said clearly that Rwanda seems to be supporting the M23 rebels. And that's the major issue that is on the table. I think, it's unfortunate that this has happened because it would be wrong to say that ECCAS is irrelevant. You have ECCAS, you have ECCAS, you have SADC, you have the Maghreb Union, you have ECOWAS, within the context of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And the larger issue of the three calabashes, in African interregional collaboration. I think it's important that these regions talk to each other because there are issues in Africa that will have to be addressed. Cooperation, collaboration, integration, transportation, aviation, and all of those frameworks under the African Free Continental Trade Agreement. If you have these countries fighting each other, it will mean two things. One, a retreat from democratic consolidation and a lack of amity among these African states that account for less than 3% of world trade that need to come together, that describe themselves as the last frontier. So, these conflicts do not bode well for Africa, whether it's in ECOWAS or it's in ECCAS or it's, in SADC, where they also have tensions. Now, as for the United States, trouble started on Friday with, protests that broke out in in the state of California over deportations by Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, popularly known as ICE. And there's been an escalation because President Trump decided to deploy first 2,000 federal guards, and later the Marines were called in, from Pendleton, from the base in Pendleton. Well, J.D. Vance says the protesters are insurrectionists. The Newsom has a different idea. He thinks that the president, by federalizing the National Guard, has gone beyond his, legal powers, constitutional powers, to the extent that he, as governor of California, is the one that is supposed to be in control of this. So you've seen the escalation of the federal guards and the Marines, firing at people, rubber bullets too, including journalists who were reporting the stories. And then you've seen also the protesters fighting back. But the more disturbing part of it is not about the checks and balances that Newsom is saying that Congress and the courts must look into. And he has gone to court to say, look, the courts have a role in this matter, Congress has a role in this matter, to check what appears to be the authoritarianism of Trump. Well, he used a stronger word. He says Trump, he thinks is deranged. However, the spread of it is the bigger part of it. In Boston, Massachusetts, people are protesting. In Tampa, Florida, people are protesting. In Texas, Houston, Texas, and other parts of America, it looks like it's spreading. So, it looks like chaos on four steels. Finally, on international news, I read a story. Frederick Forsyth is dead at the age of 86. Many will remember Frederick Forsyth as the writer of thriller fiction, The Odessa File, The Day of the Jackal, which later became a film. He also was involved in, the Biafran War as a reporter for BBC. He would later write a book on Emeka Ojukwu titled Emeka, and he was also involved for about 20 years of his life, not just as a journalist, but also with MI6, the British intelligence agency. But now he's dead, but many will remember him for the thriller novels that he wrote and how he uses journalism to advance that genre. We commiserate with his many fans all over the world who read over 75 million copies of his books.
Wonderful.
And also, the British establishment that used his talents for over 20 years as an international spy.
Well, thank you very much for your submissions. Let's move on to the newspapers. Let's take a look at the front page of This Day this morning. This Day does leave with a trifecta of stories. One is the National Assembly will be holding a special joint sitting on Thursday, the 12th of June, in honour of Democracy Day, with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu expected to attend as special guest of honour to commemorate this year's Democracy Day celebration. On the same theme, as we discussed, Mariam Abacha insists her husband, General Sani Abacha, did not annul the June 12th polls and rejects the long-standing allegations that her late husband looted billions of dollars during his time in office, insisting that there is no credible evidence to support those claims. And finally, on this day's front page, First Lady Senator Oluremi Tinubu has distributed 10,000 professional kits to midwives in Enugu during her two-day visit to the state. The New Telegraph leads with the lawmaker representing Borno South Senatorial District, Senator Ali Ndume, distancing himself from the endorsement of President Bola Tinubu for a second term in office. Ndume said that former President Goodluck Jonathan secured the endorsement of 22 governors of the then ruling People's Democratic Party in 2015, but lost re-election to former President Muhammadu Buhari, of course, of the APC. Ndume's comments are also picked up on the front page of the Vanguard. And meanwhile, the Punch reports that 10 National Assembly members from Akwa Ibom State, elected on the platform of the PDP and the Young People's Party, have resolved to join Governor Umo Eno in the APC. They join two senators from Edo, Nasarawa, and that is Neda Emaswen and Ahmed Wadada, respectively, in planning these defections to the ruling All Progressives Congress. Now, the Daily Trust leads with residents of flood-prone communities in several states resisting evacuation orders and instead asking the authorities to come to their aid where they are. That's following the recent floods that has killed over 200 people and left around 500 others missing at communities in Mokwa local government in Niger State. The federal government last week raised the alarm that 30 states and the Federal Capital Territory are currently at the risk of similar disaster. And finally, the picture headline on the Daily Times today has this image from the recently concluded Ojudoba Festival. You've got both the governor of Ogun State, Prince Dapo Abiodun, and then you've got Farouk Oreagba, who's on top of his horse. Just another reminder of the wonderful Ojudoba Festival that took place in Ijebu-Ode over the weekend. Those are your newspaper headlines.
All right.
All righty.
I believe we have just a few minutes to get into it. I think what got my attention. Did you take the Daily Independent? I'm not sure you did, right. But I was reading that in comments from Bismarck Ruwane around economic projections, specifically the value of the naira, which I thought was quite an intriguing read. In that he's saying that we're looking like we've gotten to our fair value. He says that the naira is still undervalued by about 26.8%, but that the spread between the parallel market and the official market is now just 50 naira, which means that we're really getting to the fair value of the naira. Relatively stable outlooks as well for the economy. He says he sees inflation not coming down too much, but just coming to about 23.5%. Sure. So I think it just sort of echoes a lot of what people want to hear, which is that, okay, fine, things are not easy, but at least if there can be stability that allows people to plan, whether it be businesses or whether it be private individuals, I think people are just looking at this point for a moment where there can just be a breather so people can plan the way forward. So I thought that was quite an interesting projection. Then very lastly, to Akwa Ibom, which I think is going to be fireworks upon fireworks because the former governor, Udom Emmanuel, is not a pushover. And he is insisting that he is staying in PDP. A number of people are staying in PDP. Commissioners are resigning. So I would say undoubtedly, where Akwa Ibom is concerned, something is cooking. That's what I would say.
Okay, number one, back to Mrs. Miriam Abacha. I do not think after a fashion that wives of military officers would necessarily know the full details of what their husbands get into. But we insist that, look, under General Abacha, Nigerians did not have many stories to tell. And I repeat that when he died, there was dancing in the streets. And, you know, what is important is not the revisionism that we're seeing, but the fact that it is established that that government was brutal, was dictatorial, was brutish, and that many Nigerians do not remember General Abacha fondly because he helped to derail democracy. The full extent of his role may not have been established yet, but what we know is that his tenure as Nigeria's head of state represented a very dark moment in the history of Nigeria. And he alone is partly responsible for the objection of the average Nigerian to military rule, based on experience and the suffering that they went through under him.
Yes.
Secondly, very quickly, the joint sitting of the National Assembly on the issue of June 12. June 12, today is Tuesday. June 12 is on Thursday. The issue of June 12 has not been fully resolved. June 12, 1993 was the day that Nigeria had the freest and fairest election, which united Nigerians and built a consensus around the fact that, look, Chief MKO Abiola was a preferred candidate. And then the military later annulled that election. The blame game that they are still engaging in posthumously is not of interest to us. What is of interest to us is that democracy should be allowed to thrive. And all the people who are going to sit down to say they are having a joint sitting should simply remember that we're still on the issue of electoral reform. We're still on the issue of how to make people's votes count. We're still on the issue of how democracy can serve the people of Nigeria positively. It's unfortunate that 26 years after return to democracy, we're still talking about Nigeria's democracy being fledgling, and Nigeria's democracy, putative democracy. Those are phrases we were using in those early days to define democracy. When are we going to consolidate this democracy? That should be the responsibility of those who are in charge of the institutions, which need to be strengthened further, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Adefemi Akintonia, thank you so much for the World Brief and the newspaper review.